Welcome to G Chats with Giana Jara. I'm your host, G, your biomedical engineering big sister, who's here to bring together science, sisterhood, and unfiltered conversations about vaginal health, reproductive wellness, and everything in between. Whether you're listening or you're watching, I'd like to officially and warmly welcome you to the G Spot. And yes, you heard that correctly. I'm sitting just below and right in front of a sign that says the G Spot, which is obviously a playful nod to the vaginal anatomy. But more importantly, it serves as a reminder that in this space and in this spot, it is safe and inclusive for everyone so that we can discuss things that are often overlooked, misunderstood, or sometimes just plain old awkward to bring up, with me, G, leading the conversation. From breaking down the science of your health to sharing my own personal stories and empowering you to take charge of your health, this podcast is for anyone navigating life with female reproductive organs. We're here to laugh, learn, and grow together because everyone deserves a safe space where these conversations can happen. So, grab your tea, grab your water, grab your coffee, grab whatever you like, settle in, get comfy, and let's start chatting G-style. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 1 of G Chats with your host, Giana Jara. I'm so excited to be filming this for you guys and doing this. I know that many of you are probably coming to this podcast from TikTok, so I'm really excited to have you all here. In today's episode, I wanted to just have a very candid conversation about my journey in this space in vaginal health. And if you guys are new here, just give you guys a raw, detailed understanding of who I am, who with Meraki Co is, and who I want G Chats with Giana Jara to be. So let's get right into it. So for those of you who don't know, I am a biomedical engineer by education. So I have a 4-year bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering from the great Lehigh University. I started in 2018 and I graduated. I was part of class of 2022. And I was always really passionate about female reproductive health. I feel like that's something that I've shared on TikTok a bit, and I do share in my personal life when I meet people. I love sharing that female reproductive health was something that was always super important to me, and that is mainly because when I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with an aggressive stage of pre-cervical cancer. Now, that is what really pushed me into biomedical engineering. However, growing up, I was always super artistic. Since I was in kindergarten, I remember being in kindergarten and I was writing books and I was like drawing in them, making very like graphic books. And I would bind them together and I would read to my class in kindergarten. And my kindergarten teacher would tell my mom, like, your daughter is like super artistic. She's making books, and she'd read to the class and stuff like that. So I was always super artistic. And for a while growing up, there was a point where I got into YouTube and I wasn't making content, but I was watching and consuming content. So I loved all of the like OG makeup artists. I was watching Nazan and Kavari, Jaclyn Hill, even like Mac Barbie. There was also another one. Stila Babe. Like I was just watching so many makeup artists. I was just like into the creativity, the room decors, just very artsy stuff. I guess now it's really branded as like lifestyle content, but at the time it wasn't lifestyle content. It was very like creative and artsy and lots of DIY stuff. Like that's what I was into and that's what I consumed. I remember saying like, I want to be a makeup artist. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a first generation Syrian-American woman. So my parents are Syrian. And I feel like in a traditional ethnic home, which so many of you will relate to, my parents were like, you need to be like a doctor, a lawyer, something of that nature. And I was like really thinking like artistry, artists and things like that. So then they were like, traditional, there's no money in that. You can't be an artist. I'm like, I guess. Okay, so what do I do now? And there was nothing about a doctor or a lawyer personally that like stuck for me. I just couldn't, I don't know, there was like a disconnect. But as I was getting older and I was getting into my studies and doing really well in school, I started to grow a really strong passion for science. And when you think of science directly, you think of doctor. And something about being a doctor just didn't stick for me. It didn't. It did not stick for me. I was like, there's something missing. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what was missing at the time. I was so young, but I knew I wanted to do something in science, but something was truly missing for me. So that prompted me as I was like getting older and I was in high school. I was still always super creative, super artistic. And when my mom was diagnosed with her aggressive stage of pre-cervical cancer, that was kind of the aha moment. I was already like excelling in science and biology and things like that. And I knew I wanted to do something in the medical space. And when we met with my mom's doctor and she basically showed us the device that would extract the abnormal cells from her cervix, she mentioned that this was designed and created by a team of biomedical engineers. And that was honestly my aha moment because it was the creation and the design of something in the medical space. So it blended my passion for art, DIY, creation, and science, something that I was really passionate about, helping people. For a while, I thought like I was going to go into oncology, which is the study of cancer. I thought I was going to go into that. I thought I was going to do something in cancer research. I was just very passionate about helping people and creating something to help people. So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to create the cure to cancer. Like that's what I was thinking. And so when that happened, that was like my aha moment. And I knew immediately, okay, I want to pursue biomedical engineering, started looking at universities, and lo and behold, Lehigh University is near my hometown. And so I was like, I want to stay local, and I still lived on campus and everything, but I loved being in a new space that's not too far away from home. The other option that I considered was Johns Hopkins University, great university. But I ended up just doing early decision at Lehigh, and I got in. I did ED1 and I got in. I was admitted in December of 2017. So this was before graduation, in the springtime. So I knew immediately, like I was locked into Lehigh and I wanted to go there. I was super excited, and I pursued my biomedical engineering degree and I never looked back, honestly. So at my time at Lehigh University, I battled my own female reproductive health issues with none other than urinary tract infections, which is one of the most common urinary vaginal infections in the world. They are so common. They are very scary for elderly people. They're common in younger children. They're common in reproductive age women. They are common in older men. Their urinary tract infections are so common. However, I didn't know too much about UTIs. It was just like a word I heard in passing, but it's nothing that I felt like I was educated formally on. So when I got my first UTI, I actually didn't know I was having a UTI, which is so scary to think back on. I had no idea. I was so confused, and ironically, and the reason it's ironic, I'll get into the science in a little bit, but I was actually on my period, my very first urinary tract infection. So I had attributed the uncomfortable symptoms that I was having to my period. So I actually ignored my symptoms of a UTI for, I want to say, like 4 or 5 days until my body couldn't anymore, and I went to the hospital. Yes, you heard that correctly. I went to the hospital. So I was actually hospitalized. I could barely pee. I was having a fever of 103. It didn't help that I had a cold too. So the combination of a weakened immune system with being on my period, with having a UTI, I was just going through it. And I remember being in the hospital and they were asking me, like, what are your symptoms? Because at first they just thought like I'm having a cold. I'm probably having strep throat or something. But then I told them it hurts when I pee. And they're like, okay, we're just pee in a cup. We're going to see what's going on. And they're like, yeah, you have a UTI. And I honestly, it was one of those things I was like, a UTI? How did I get a UTI? Where did this UTI come from? Like, how did this happen? It was so random. I never had one before. It came out of nowhere. And I honestly was like afraid to say something to my mom at first. I mean, my mom came to the hospital, both my mom and my dad, and they're amazing. Like they literally didn't care. They were just happy I was okay. But they were my emergency contact, so they knew. But yeah, they were just like super happy that I was okay. And I was just like thinking, okay, like where does the UTI come from? And like, how did I get this? And I was so scared and so confused and so like perplexed, honestly, lost. And I thought nothing of it. I took my antibiotics after that. Like I just got out the hospital and thought nothing of it. And then I had that one UTI and then it came back. And then it came back again. And then it came back again. And it came back and it just kept coming back. And that was where it started to get concerning that like my UTIs were just coming back rapid fire. And it didn't help because everything that you read on the internet is so surface level. Everything was like, oh, once you get one UTI, you're more likely to get 6 more. And I'm scratching my head like, why? Why is it that I get one UTI and I can keep getting them? You read the same thing for yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis. Everyone's always like, the internet's always like, and even the doctors, the more ER visits I had, the more angry I was getting. Every time I went, it's like, oh, do you wipe front to back? Do you shower daily? Do you like all of these like questions that and suggestions that the internet tells you about? That's like, no, duh, obviously. Like, obviously, I'm wiping front to back, especially because this is like my 8th UTI. So you can imagine I was taking every precaution necessary to not get another UTI. And I'm being asked, do you wipe front to back? Which some people might not know that, and that's okay. And I think that that's important to educate young women and just women of all ages. If they don't know that, that's fine. But it almost becomes, there's a point where it becomes insulting when they see my chart and there's multiple visits and I'm crying in the ER out of frustration saying I'm doing everything. And the question is, do you wipe front to back? Do you shower? I'm like, what? So that was honestly one of the, I'd say like, if you will, the villain origin story was the repeated dumb questions at the ER. And then also not seeing success with treatment after. It was just becoming so frustrating and so irritating. And there was a point where my doctors were like, we don't know what else to do for you. And this is a common thing. We see a ton of doctors drop their patients all the time because they don't know what else to do for them. So their suggestion was that I see a specialist, which you think, yay, I'm going to see a specialist. I'm going to, my life's going to change and go back to normal. I'm going to be okay. Now I want to know at this point, because I had so many UTIs, I've become resistant to 3 different kinds of antibiotics. And I would take an antibiotic. I remember the one time I was on cephalexin and I took it for the 7 days. I completed my dosage on a Friday. I woke up on a Saturday and I went to pee, my morning pee, and I was screaming from the pain and I started crying. I knew, I was like, I have a UTI. But in my mind, I was like, there's no way this is a new UTI. The original one just never went away. And I was so upset. I'm like, the antibiotics aren't working. And I drove so fast because it was a weekend. So my doctor's office, my family practitioner, they close at noon. So I drove so fast to the doctor's office. Thank God I didn't live too far. I was home for winter break. And I drove and I told them, like, something's wrong. I don't know why this is happening. Like, you need to do something. So they took a sample of my urine and then they just prescribed me a new antibiotic. So at this point, when I'm going to see this specialist, I'm resistant to 3 different kinds of antibiotics. So I go in so excited thinking this is it. This is going to be the turning point. This is where I'm going to get good advice. And you guys want to know what my physician suggested the next steps that we do and the next steps that we take? Well, they told me we are going to do 6 months of antibiotic therapy. So I'm already resistant to 3 different kinds of antibiotics, and the suggestion by a doctor is 6 months of antibiotic therapy, which honestly, I should have known going in because, again, surface level Google searches will tell you the treatments, and I cannot tell you as a biomedical engineer and now at 25 years old, knowing what I know, when I go on Google and I read the suggestions, the tips and the tricks that they give for urinary tract infections and the way antibiotics are prescribed is so saddening and maddening. It angers me to my core. The common way that antibiotics, and I talk a lot about this in my professional career, The way antibiotics are prescribed for people suffering with urinary tract infections are either 6 months of antibiotic therapy or a low dose of antibiotics every single time you have sex. Both of those options are absolutely horrific. To treat antibiotics as a long-term solution is such a red flag. And then also to treat antibiotics like it's something you can just pop willy-nilly after sex, like your body's not going to become resistant to it in either ways, is just so insane to me. And so at this point, we need to remember I was battling these urinary tract infections for, I want to say, like a year and a half. So I was into my junior year at this point. Now, junior year of biomedical engineering is when it gets fun and it gets serious because you're starting to learn real stuff. You're not taking the introductory to chemistry or calculus. You're taking biomedical engineering work. And I started to learn about antibiotics, antibiotic resistance, and superbugs, and all these things. I really started to get into, this is where we took engineering, anatomy, and physiology, and I fell in love with those courses. They were my favorite. The first one was rough, very hard. The second one was much better, but I started taking these classes, and my junior year, the start of my junior year, was actually COVID. So it was COVID year, and I initially was going to do an internship at Lehigh University, but the internship got canceled due to COVID. And so basically every internship got canceled. Everything was canceled because of COVID. And I felt that there was a strong need. Like I needed to get some kind of professional experience. I was going into my junior year. And that professional experience ended up being me working for my local hospital at a specialty lab. And that specialty lab was microbiology. And honestly, that I would say was the turning point in my career and in my education. I learned so much from working in microbiology, especially because it's a clinical setting. We get patient specimens. So I was getting specimens from all different hospitals in the area, from like a bunch of different counties. And I was the one working behind the scenes, plating all of the specimens, culturing them, receiving them, running PCR samples. I got everything from urine samples, so people with suspected UTIs, vaginal swabs, wound cultures, tissue cultures. I was getting fingers and toes, guys. I was getting poops. I was getting every specimen that you could think of to test it for bacteria and later viruses. So I was a part of the COVID team at my microbiology lab. I was running the RSV, influenza, and COVID panels on the PCR machines, which was honestly like, it was rough. We were getting hundreds of specimens for COVID tests. And it was scary to be like on the front line, like dealing with these specimens, knowing like I'm opening them, like people swab their nose and like 90% of them are coming back positive and I'm like touching them. So it was quite like scary and intimidating, but I had so much fun because I learned so much about microbiology while I was working there. And that was kind of like the turning point to be able to, now, just so you guys know, like in microbiology, how it works is you have the people, the laboratory scientists and the lab aides who plate the stuff. And then after they're all plated and the bacteria is grown in the incubator, they're then read. The plates are read by the medical technologists and or the medical scientists. And when they read these plates, they determine like what's growing on them, what bacteria, and that gets reported. And they start to do prompts. And prompts are basically saline solutions with the bacteria that gets inoculated into it. And they give us, the lab scientists or the lab aides, the prompts, and we put them in these wells, and there's antibiotics in these wells. And basically it's to see what the bacteria is resistant to and what antibiotics can treat the bacteria. So it was really cool because basically it's an antibiotic susceptibility test. So I got to see cultures and susceptibility tests done right in front of me and understood how infections are identified and worked with specimens, like literally hands on. And I was the one running the susceptibility test, running the culturing. Like, it was just so cool to see. I pull up a chair next to the medical techs and got to see them reading it. And, certain bacteria has a certain smell, and that's how they're identifying. Like, it was just such a cool experience. And that's what really grew my knowledge in this space. And then when I was a junior and I was still in my studies, I just felt like I was coming into junior year so intelligently and just almost like I had a competitive edge. I was working in a clinical setting, something that I feel like even an internship wouldn't have taught me. And so I worked at the microbiology lab for 2 years. I was there for 2 years and I just learned so much. And from there, I was able to basically start independent research at my university as a junior, as a biomedical engineer. So under one of my biomedical engineering professors, I asked if I could borrow her lab, and I started doing my own research for capstone, which is senior design. So senior design rolls around, and I don't know if other universities are like this, but at least for Lehigh and the biomedical engineering department, our senior design started in the spring of junior year and then ended in the fall of senior year. So it is 2 semesters, but you end it in the fall of your senior year, rather than doing it all senior year. So I spent with my group time, and I basically told my group that I was matched with that I would love to study probiotics and showcase that probiotics are able to generate an acidic pH. Now, where did that come from? That came from after I saw the specialist, and the specialist was like, yeah, we're going to do 6 months of antibiotic therapy. I was like, absolutely not. No, we are not. We're not doing this. So I went and did what biomedical engineers know how to do best, and that is research. But research is not Googling. Let's get something out of the way. So many people think like, oh, I did my research. I researched a supplement. Googling is not research. It's just not. And I say this not to discredit people looking into things, but I say this because you have to understand that people will try to sell you things, tell you things, and their research is Google, and that is untrue. It is a true skill to be able to dissect research papers, understand research papers, and know what they're saying, because sometimes research papers are intentionally complicated so that the average person can't read them. And so being a biomedical engineer and being the person who's been spending time learning these things and then also writing research papers myself. So I was writing research papers. I've read a plethora at this point of research papers in my education. I had the skill set to be able to read research papers, read scholarly articles, medical journals, and be able to understand what are the results of these studies, what are they telling me, understand the statistics, all of that. So I had that background, I had that knowledge, I had that skill set. So that's what research is. So I started to do research, and that for me was going on NCBI, going on PubMed, and going on these platforms that have medical journals, scholarly articles, research papers, and start dissecting them. So I started off with understanding UTIs, learning about UTIs. And in that opened me up to the world of the vaginal microbiome. This is where I learned that all of the antibiotics I was taking was actually depleting my vaginal microbiome of all of its healthy, good bacteria that it needs. And this is where I learned that this healthy and good bacteria produces lactic acid and hydrogen peroxide, which generates an acidic pH. So growing up, and again, Googling, you will always hear that the vagina is 2 things. A, that it is self-cleaning, and B, that it has an acidic pH. But nobody ever explained why that is, right? No one's ever told us, why is it self-cleaning? Why is it acidic? Well, the why is because of good bacteria in your vagina. Every single healthy vaginal culture that is characterized by 3.8 and 4.5 has had the bacteria of lactobacilli. So lactobacillus is like a family of good bacteria, and there's many different strains, and most of these strains that are found in the vagina are strains that produce lactic acid. So knowing this information that probiotics produce lactic acid and generate this acidic pH, I knew this by reading these scholarly articles, but I wanted to show that. I wanted to prove that almost both to myself, but to my professors, and just have like actual data from myself, my own experimentation. And so I designed and executed an experiment where I used pH indicator dyes, and these are essentially dyes that have different colors based on their pH. So there's like bromocresol purple, I believe, was one that I used, bromophenol blue. So there's different indicator dyes, and basically if it's like a really high pH, let's say 7.0, then it's blue, but then when it's like at a 4.8, it's yellow. So they have color changes based on the pH, and each of them have a set range. So I chose like 4 different pH indicator dyes that had a different range. And what I did was I grew these probiotic strains, these good bacterial strains that I was reading about. I grew them, I plated them, I incubated them. And after growing them, I inoculated them, and I kept it consistent with the amount that I was inoculating into each tube set. And I did a visual observation, so you could visually see the color change between these pH indicator dyes, because they were introduced to something that was acidic, something that was producing acidity. And then I also measured the pH. So I had the starting value, and then after letting them grow for a few days inside of the tube sets, we were able to identify like the pH value actually changed. So we had numerical data and we had visual data. And that was what I like ran with, to be like, this is a real thing. These probiotics, these good bacterial strains, they produce lactic acid. They generate an acidic pH. And that was like the aha moment that I was like, okay, how do you get good bacteria back into your body? And that was through probiotic supplementation. And through my research, I started curating what makes a gold standard, top tier probiotic for urinary and vaginal health. And if I'm being completely honest, it just didn't exist. There wasn't a gold standard top tier. It just wasn't there. And that was kind of my realization, that I have this criteria of what a probiotic, a top tier probiotic, should be for urinary and vaginal health, and it didn't exist. And that's where I was like, why don't I be the change? And that's how With Meraki Co was born. So I want to go over why I chose With Meraki Co as the name. So honestly, the story behind that is so funny and very innocent. I literally Googled like cool names on Google, and the word Meraki came up, and it was a beautiful name. But when I read the definition, that's what solidified it. So Meraki is a Greek word that means to do something with love, soul, and creativity, and to leave a piece of yourself in your work. So that was it for me. That solidified it. So when I was like, I'm going to name this business and these probiotics, like the brand name, With Meraki Co, which means with love, soul, and creativity company, it's true to who I am. It's true to the brand, and it's true to what I want to do with the world. I want to give love, soul, and creativity to the world, and I want to leave a piece of myself to the world through my brand. So that's how With Meraki Co came to be. But let's remember, I didn't have a business bone in my body. I was a scientist. So I had no idea how to start a business at all. And this is where I literally presented my capstone project with my group. And my group, I love them, but they weren't as passionate as I was. Like, this was my story, my mission. So we presented and everything. And my grader happened to be a professor in the entrepreneurship school. And he was like so impressed by the work, so impressed by the research and everything. And he basically said, like, if you ever need anything, like, just reach out. And I was like, oh, okay. So I wrote his name down. Now, remember, like I said, capstone ends your senior year fall. So this was December, we presented, and then I went on break, but I wrote his name down. So when I came back to my apartment, because I went home for winter break, and when I came back to my apartment and the spring semester of my senior year started, I was like, wait, I remembered this guy's name that I wrote down. I really want to reach out to him because I truly think that there's a business here. I just don't know what to do. I don't have anyone in my family that owns a business. I'm the first. I don't know how to go about this. I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm a scientist. Like I'm the lab rat. Like I don't know what to do. So I reached out to the guy, and he was amazing. His name's Chris. He was so wonderful and took me under his wing and told me come to the Baker Institute at Lehigh, and really like helped get me into a space of an entrepreneur and understand what business is like and what an entrepreneur is like. And so he helped coach me, essentially. He was my coach, my business coach. And he was like, we do these things called Eureka pitch nights. So you should pitch, and you should basically pitch your idea. And we help with coaching, and the program helps with giving you funding. So you should do it. And I was like, okay, fine. So I pitched at stage 3. I just made slides, and I went up with note cards, and I pitched. And I remember all my friends went. I was super excited, and I won. I won $1,000, and that was huge for me. It was a small win that felt so big. And it was just what I needed. And when I tell you guys, I went into this as a sponge. Like I went into this saying, I am going to learn as much as I can. I want to soak up all the information. I want to be coached. I want to be told, how can I grow my business? I need all this information. I need it. I want it. I'm hungry. Give it to me. And so, it just made the experience so much better, so great, because I was so willing and open to learning. And I was paired with a couple of different coaches, and they were all amazing. And they were giving me so much feedback and information on how to start the business, what to do, and all of that. And I, from there, was just doing other pitch competitions at Lehigh University. I did the Thalheimer Grand Prize event. I was later accepted into the Lehigh's Ventures Lab after I graduated from Lehigh. I graduated in May of 2022, and then I did the Ventures Lab program, which was meant for like new grads and young entrepreneurs to get the coaching and the funding. So I got further grants, and that grant over the summer was just enough for me to manufacture my first batch of inventory. So I went through so many different labs trying to find the right lab for me, and I finally found a really good lab, and that's who I partnered with. And I manufactured my first batch of inventory in August of 2022, but I was in the program at Lehigh in June of 2022. And in the program, my mentors and my coaches and my colleagues, the other two students, if you will, who just graduated and they were in the program with me, they're like, Giana, you need to share your story and you should do that on TikTok. And I was like, ew, no, I'm not making a TikTok. I didn't have I had a TikTok, but like I wasn't really posting on it. I at that time just thought like, ew, TikTok is so cringy, blah, blah, blah. Like that was my mindset, especially because like this was 2022. So we had moved past the COVID era. And like, I think at this point we were all reflecting at 2020 and we were like, what are these people thinking? What kind of TikToks were these? So I was like, yeah, everyone thinks TikTok's cringe. I'm not making a TikTok. But everyone around me was like, you should. Your story is powerful. It's meaningful. You really, really should tell your story. So I was like, okay, fine. And I did. I told my story, and that video is still pinned on my page. It went viral. It got 2.2 million views, and I could not believe it. I had thousands of people joining my wait list on my website before I even had my product. So I didn't even manufacture my batch of inventory yet, and I had people joining my wait list. I had so many people sending me amazing messages through my website. I left like a little chat box when you join the wait list so you could like leave a message and share your excitement. Thousands of people telling me like, you're what we need. I'm gonna cry. So many people telling me like, this is what we need. Like, you are truly changing the space and we need someone like you, a biomedical engineer who cares, who's passionate. And I felt like this is my mission. This is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was that instant validation of I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing. It's hard when you start a business and you have no experience and you don't know what you're doing and you're just like, am I doing the right thing? Is this business going to flop? You have all these fears. Like, am I going to fail? And then you share your story and everyone's like, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for. I've dealt with UTIs, and also just like right there and then forming that community on my page of all of these people with female reproductive organs. Like everybody is having a conversation with each other saying, I've had 8 UTIs, I had BV, and then I had a yeast infection, I had this and I had that. Like all of these people saying they had these issues. And they're like, I've dealt with this too. Please, I need your product. Like, I need to know when you launch. Like, I need it as well. Seeing all of that, I'm like, this is such a common, and I already knew like statistically that this was a common issue, but seeing that play out like in front of you where people are like, yes, this is what I need. Like I suffered with this too. I was just like, this is it. This is what I need to do, and I need to make a difference. I always said growing up, like, I want to help people. I want to help people. I just didn't know how. And I touched on that in the beginning of this podcast. I thought it was going to be cancer research. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I knew I wanted to help people in science. I didn't know how. And this was it. By creating something that I'm passionate about and educating people and building a community so that people feel safe. And my comment section, my website was literally, both of them were like a safe space for so many people who like knew just my story and trusted me, believed in me, were excited for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want out of my life, to build this community and have these people around me and help these people and give this education and create educational content and talk about the things that you can't find on Google and share and pick my brain apart and give you guys this information to help you achieve optimal urinary and vaginal health, and then also provide products for that need. That was my passion, and that's what I was going to do. And so from there, I launched my business in August of 2022, and with Meraki Co has been blossoming since. I was working as an engineer and running my business, so that was really difficult, basically functioning as an engineer, a scientist in my day job, and then leaving, going home, showering and eating, and coming back to my office and running my business. And I always said, like, I'm a full-time founder because I'm running my business full-time, but I still have another full-time job. And it's like, you can't have 2 full-time jobs. I'm like, oh, yes, you can when you're an entrepreneur. And I talk a lot about this, that I don't like to glorify that. It was something that I needed to do given the situation that I was in. It's not something that we should advise because it's not healthy. I later was just so stressed. My stress hormones were just so bad that I was losing hair. I was having acne. I was having intestinal issues. I was having a ton of hormonal issues because of my stress levels. So I think it's really important, and maybe we can do an episode about hormones, and we probably will, and I will dive much deeper about that side of the story. But ultimately, I pursued my business full time, and literally full time this time around. I left my engineering job of June of 2024, and for the last 6 months, so now it's January 2025, the last 6 months I've been able to get up to speed with running my business full time, and this being my one and only job. And it's been the best decision that I've made for both the business and myself. I'm just so happy. I'm so passionate. I'm so excited. And the obvious, I think, elephant in the room is like, why now with the podcast? And I think it goes hand in hand with I left my full-time job, so I have the bandwidth to be able to do this. But B, the elephant that I'm talking about is the fact that TikTok might be getting taken away. And I just want to preface that starting a podcast and doing this is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. Like, I was talking about this with my best friends, my girlfriends, for months. Like, I was saying, I want to do this. I want to create a podcast. And I said, I want to name it G Chats. I had this whole vision, but I couldn't execute it because I was working a full-time job as an engineer and then running my business. So I was packing all of my orders right here, this space, like right where the G spot is. I was packing orders, all of my orders for the last 2 years right here in this space. And it's a one-woman show. I've been running my business all by myself. So I've been handling everything from being the CEO to being the CFO to the COO, the everything, like the CMO. Like, I've been running all of it. And I was also doing I was managing all of it and then doing all the work. So creating the marketing content, packaging the orders, going through the data and coming out with the KPIs and putting it in an Excel spreadsheet. I was doing all of it. And it was very tiring, very time consuming. And ultimately, the best decision for me was to go full time. I was in a position, thank the Lord, to be able to do that and go full time. And it's been such a good decision for me. And I've been able to task off certain things to other companies, other people. So packaging orders was something I no longer felt it was necessary for me to do. So I partnered with a warehouse and they're packing my orders now in Texas, which is wonderful and huge and exciting for the business, such a big step. And I've been able to free up my schedule to do other things. And I always say this, aside from creating optimal products for urinary and vaginal health and being a creative and being a scientist and creating these products and, expanding the brand line, I think the backbone for with Meraki Co and for me as a human and as a scientist will always be the education. I want to continue educating you guys on female reproductive health, giving you all the information you need to feel empowered, to be able to take charge of your vaginal health and be able to feel like you are your biggest advocate so that when you go into the doctor's office, you know what questions to ask for. You know what your results tell you. You know the next steps to your results. I want to give you guys the ability to feel empowered, for you guys to feel like you know what's going on and that you're not alone. And so the education is such a huge backbone of the business and of my career that I've built my TikTok platform to be able to do just that. But the scary reality is that might get taken away from us. And I don't want that to be ripped away from you guys. And so I was like, I need to do this on another platform. And that other platform is podcasting. I think it just tracks well that I don't have to think about, I got to get this information out in 3 minutes or maximum 10 minutes. And shout out to you guys because my long form content on TikTok has done so incredibly well. You guys have been such a huge support system for me because you guys make my long form content on TikTok go viral. And I'm like, that's insane because everyone's like, TikTok's a short form platform. Meanwhile, Giana with Meraki Co is going viral for 8-minute videos and it's 3-minute videos. It's so impressive how receptive you guys are to educational content. And honestly, that was where I was like, this is something that the people need and I want to continue it because I truly love doing it and I'm passionate about it. And so that is where G-Chats with Giana was born. And so that's what I hope to carry out throughout this podcast. And honestly, even if TikTok doesn't go away, I will still make my same old content on TikTok and I can pull content from this podcast to share on TikTok. I'm not going anywhere on TikTok if it doesn't go away. But this is just a place to expand and to know what you're getting when you come here, right? TikTok's just, sometimes it's trendy videos, sometimes it's answering comments and whatnot. But this is a specific place that you can come here because you know what's going to be talked about, the conversations that are going to be had, and we can just have raw, unfiltered conversations with G leading the conversation, as I mentioned in the beginning. So I'm really excited to see what comes from this podcast. I have very, very exciting episodes planned. I have a whole plan of what episodes I want to produce next. So I'm really excited for you guys to be on this journey with me. I'm excited to be on this journey with you guys. Thank you for your love, support. I'm so appreciative of everything that I've earned and achieved this whole time. And I'm so excited to embark on this new journey of G-Chats right here in the G-Spot. So if you did enjoy this episode and you're excited to see more, please don't forget to find me on all of the podcasting platforms. I will have everything linked below. You can find it all down below. Please don't forget to subscribe, to follow, to rate, to review. Please leave all of that information in those details. That would be really helpful for the podcast and for me. And so, yeah, until next time, we will chat G style. And I love you guys so, so much. And always remember that this podcast and these conversations are designed and made with love, soul, and creativity.